Welcome back to our next part in our series of lectures on European exploration. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at French and Russian expansion and exploration in period 2 from 1450 to 1750. And so we have said previously in our last lecture that one of the reasons for European exploration is this idea of national rivalries, that countries are going to go send out explorers because their rivals have done so. And in France's case, Spain and Portugal, which are just south of them, have already gotten rich because they've been sending out explorers and they've been getting wealthy from New World silver and from new routes to India and from spices and from all other kinds of goods that we're getting from the rest of the world. And so France realizes they must either they must compete as well or die. And so they're driven by these national rivalries to go get more colonies. Another reason France explores is just like Spain and just like Portugal, they're Catholic. And so in future lectures, we'll talk about this, but the Reformation is going on at this point where Protestants and Catholics are fighting each other and vying for converts. And so France believes it's part of their mission to go send out Jesuit priests to go and convert new people to Catholicism instead of Protestantism. And so this will be another kind of religious motive for exploration. All right, so where do the French go? Well, the French, all of the routes to India at this point and China have been taken, the overland and maritime routes. And so the French, much like the English, are trying to find a route to Asia through North America. They're trying to find the fabled Northwest Passage that we talked about last time. And so as French explorers kind of inch around the coasts of North America, looking for a nice way to get through North America and then get to China, they discover the Mississippi River, and for a while they think, oh, that must be a route to China, this big, huge river. But of course, it's not. It's just a river. But all the land that touches the Mississippi River will be called Louisiana in honor of King Louis. And so that'll be a huge French colony in the New World. And then also they'll discover that what's called the St. Lawrence Seaway right here, which leads into the Great Lakes. And again, they thought, well, maybe that's the water route through North America that will lead us to China. And of course, it's not either. But this also gives another colony for the French called New France up in northern North America. And so even though none of these are the Northwest Passage, because it doesn't exist, they are going to get huge colonies in North America. Now, they don't discover big, large-scale Native American civilizations like the Spanish did with the Aztecs and Incas. They don't discover gold and silver, also like the Spanish did. But what they do find is they find a bunch of animal pelts. And so back in Europe, there's a huge market for New World furs, beaver furs, bear furs, those kinds of things, because it was a sign of nobility. If you were a member of the noble class, you could wear furs and nobody else could. And so there is a market for these things. And the Europeans don't have any furs left because they've pretty much killed all of their fur-bearing animals. And so the French have a way of making money. And so that keeps them coming back, even when they know there's no Northwest Passage. Next, the French are also going to discover some of the islands in the Caribbean. For example, right here is Haiti, and so they're going to take that, and that's going to be a very valuable island for their empire because you can grow sugar in these tropical climates. And so the French will also be drawn to the New World for sugar production, which they'll make a lot of money off of, and so that will then look for more islands as well. And so we see the French are interested in the New World for monetary reasons. Let's talk, before we get into mercantilism, I had said that the French want to spread Catholicism, which is true. They do send Jesuit priests to the New World, to North America, but they really don't push it here because the French need Native Americans to go get the furs for them. The Native Americans know where the animals are, and so they'll ask the Native Americans, have you heard about Catholicism? But they don't force them to convert, kind of like the Spanish did in the New World, because the French need the natives. They don't want to tick off the natives. And so they have a pretty good relationship with the natives, but not force conversion on them. All right, now let's talk about the concept of mercantilism. And so this is something that I could have put in any of our lectures talking about the Spanish exploration or English or Dutch, right? They're all motivated by it, but I decided to put it here because we have room here. And so mercantilism is an economic theory. It basically believes that the amount of wealth in the entire world is finite. It can be measured. And let's show this here by this pie chart, right? And so this pie represents all the wealth in the world. world. And so countries of the world have slices of the pie. So maybe this is Spain. This is their slice of world wealth. And maybe this is the Dutch, right? And maybe this is, I don't know, the Ming Dynasty in China, right? And so the wealth of the world can be measured, and different countries have different amounts of that pie piece. Okay, so that's the first part of mercantilism, is the idea that wealth is finite, it can be measured, and every country has a slice of that wealth. This will lead to exploration because, right, let's pretend, okay, so here's the French piece of the pie, right? So if the Spanish go out and get more New World colonies, they find more silver mines, more gold mines, they start to find another sugar island, their piece of the wealth pie gets bigger, right? And so here we see this kind of dotted line. Spain's slice of the pie has just gotten bigger, which must mean, if wealth is finite, that the French piece has to get smaller, because the pie doesn't grow, we just divvy up the pieces in a different way. And so, of course, the French cannot let the Spanish continue to get wealthier and wealthier with new colonies, because that means Spain is getting wealthy, and that means the French piece of the pie must, by implication, get smaller, right? And so we have this is a motivating factor to go get colonies, mercantilism. It ties into national rivalries, but this is the more economic side of it, that if my enemies, my rivals, are getting more wealth, that must mean, according to mercantilism, my pie piece is getting smaller. Even if I sit and do nothing, right? I'm still losing. And so I have to go get more colonies, so my pie piece gets bigger, so I get wealthier, right? So I can compete with all my rivals in Europe. And so mercantilism is going to be another cause of exploration for Europeans. Now let's look at where else the French go besides North America. And so the French, we had said, do get some colonies in the Caribbean to grow sugar, but then the French are going to find their way into Southeast Asia, and there is a part of Southeast Asia that has not been conquered by other Europeans. It is Indochina. Indochina is what we today call Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. And so the French are going to take that over, they're going to send colonists over, and they're going to dominate the area with their gunpowder weapons. And what they're going to grow in Southeast Asia is they find out that obviously champa rice grows really well there. And so the French are going to use Indochina as a base to grow food for the rest of their far-flung empire. And so it becomes a very important part in their world trade. Also, there is palm oil that can grow in Southeast Asia. That's not going to be such an important thing in this time period, but in the next time period, when we get into industrialization in period 3, it's going to be even more important for the French Empire. And so, okay, so there's also tin that can be found in Southeast Asia. Now, when the French get into Southeast Asia and they start buying rice and growing rice in the region, they start to trade with merchants in Southeast Asia. And here we have a little bit of a unique situation, is that in Southeast Asia, as we've talked about before, women have a position where they can own businesses. And a lot of these women were merchants themselves. And so the French, even though they're a patriarchal, male-dominated society, they learn if they want to do business and get their rice in Southeast Asia, they've got to trade with these female merchants. And so we see that this is a continuity in Southeast Asia, that female merchants, even though Europeans are going to come in, they're still going to maintain a lot of their power and privilege and position in society because they're the merchants dealing with the French. All right, now let's go move on to Russia. Now, this is a great contrast, unlike all the other European countries we've talked about at this time, the Russians don't create much of a maritime empire at this point because they're landlocked, right? The Russians are in this blue area right now, and the Russians are going to launch a series of conquests throughout this time period, but the conquests are all going to be to the east because they really can't conquer a lot to the west because that's when some of their big European rivals are who are strong, and they're able to keep the Russians out. And so the Russians, even though they have all this coastline, look at all this coastline available to them. Even if they do expand up here, it's frozen. So the Russians aren't going to have a maritime empire. Even this area over here in the Baltic is frozen most of the year. The Caspian and Black Seas here and here are also landlocked, or they are controlled by other empires with their access to the ocean. And so really the Russians, the only way they can expand and get colonies and compete with the rest of Europe is to create a land-based empire instead of a port-based empire or a maritime empire. And so we're going to see a whole bunch of Russian armies start to move from west to east at this time. Now, as they go east, of course, they're going to be looking for resources that they can exploit and get wealthy off of. And so this makes them very similar to the French, because this part of Europe, this part of Asia, I'm sorry, is the taiga forest, and it is this huge forest that has lots of animals in it. And so these animals are fur-bearing animals, and so the Russians are going to get wealthy at this time from taking a lot of these animal pelts and then sending them back to Europe for money. Now, just like the French in the New World, the Russians don't really know where these animals are, so they're going to use natives that we may refer to as Eskimos. They're not Eskimos, but they kind of look like it from an American viewpoint, just so you can kind of understand who they are. And they are going to be used, these native people, to go get the furs for the Russians, right? And so the Russians have a somewhat similar relationship with natives that the French do in North America. We are going to go trade with or demand that these natives go get us furs. In return, we'll give them some trade goods. And so we see that as a reason for Russian advancement to the east. All right. Next, let's talk about learning objectives. And so, to what extent was France's motives for exploration similar to other European states? And we had said it was very similar as this idea of national rivalries and mercantilism. Next, describe the philosophy of mercantilism. We've done that. We've talked about how it is an idea that wealth can be measured and it's finite, and if your enemy gains wealth, you must be losing wealth, because of our pie example. And so then that encourages people to go out and compete and explore because they want their pie piece to get bigger. 18. Identify how the French made money in the Americas, furs mostly, but also some sugar in the Caribbean, and in Indochina. And in Indochina at this point, it's mostly growing rice and then trading it to other places and also using it to feed their growing empire. 19. To what extent was Russia colonization similar to the French? And we said that it's different in that the French are going to have a maritime empire and a land-based empire, and the Russians are really just a land-based empire. They're going to get a land-based empire as they go across Siberia and across the continent of Asia to the east. All right, so when we come back, we'll talk about part 4 of our lecture, and we'll talk about the Columbian Exchange and its impact on the Americas and its impact on Europe as well.